What if the phone number you dialed out of nostalgia connected you not to your past, but to a little voice carrying the weight of it? That's exactly what happened to Weston Clarke, one of the most powerful names in American tech, a man worth over $6 billion who had everything except the one thing he needed: closure. He was standing at the edge of his glass-walled office in downtown Denver, watching the skyline shimmer under the late morning sun. Behind him, his assistant had just placed an archival box on his desk. Old letters, documents, photos pulled from a long-forgotten drawer in his home office. His company was celebrating its 30-year anniversary, and some junior associate thought it would be cute to gather nostalgic artifacts for the upcoming gala. Weston hadn't expected the box to shake him, but then, there it was, a letter, written in a hand he hadn't seen in decades. It began with a name. Weston, if you're reading this, I finally worked up the courage. That handwriting? It belonged to Marcus Evers, his best friend, his brother, his compass in a world that had once been all cracked pavement, cold nights, and bus tokens scraped from vending machine returns. Marcus was the quiet fire. Weston had been the storm. They'd survived the streets of Cincinnati together. Two kids with no safety net, no family, no roadmap except each other. Marcus could talk a cop out of a ticket and fix a busted heater with a paperclip. Weston just fought to stay alive. When Weston made it big, when the garage startup went from ramen noodles to Wall Street ringing bells, he lost touch with Marcus. Or maybe he let go, thinking he'd go back one day. One day. Now that day had come. Weston sat at his desk and stared at the letter. His hand trembled as he lifted the receiver and dialed the number Marcus had written at the bottom. Not a cell number, a landline. The line rang once, twice. Then a small, steady voice answered, a voice that didn't sound old enough to be Marcus. Hello? Weston blinked. Hi, is Marcus Evers available? There was a pause, then, soft as a breeze, Daddy's in heaven. It hit Weston like a punch to the gut. He froze, his breath caught halfway between disbelief and heartbreak. I'm sorry, sweetheart, he stammered. Who am I speaking with? My name's Lila. You called my daddy's phone. Weston couldn't breathe. A child. Marcus's child. How old are you, Lila? 7.5. Her voice was calm, unshaken, too mature. My grandma says Daddy's watching over us now, and if someone named Weston Clarke ever called, we should be nice. She said you were important once. Once. Weston closed his eyes. That single word cut deeper than any boardroom betrayal ever had. He swallowed hard. Is your grandma there, Lila? Yes, sir. She's tired a lot. I help her when I can. I'd like to come visit you both. Would that be okay? There was a shuffling sound, perhaps Lila glancing towards someone nearby. I think she'd like that, she said. We don't get many visitors. Weston's grip tightened around the phone. The letter from Marcus still lay open on the desk beside him, ink faded but unflinching in its message. I don't want money, I just want a chance. Not for me, for Lila. She deserves the kind of life we used to dream about. Weston hung up gently. He sat in stunned silence as the skyline outside darkened slightly, clouds gathering in slow rolls. For a long time he did nothing. Then he whispered, I'm coming, Marcus. I'm sorry I took so long. And for the first time in years, Weston Clarke cleared his entire calendar. The next morning, a yellow cab pulled away from the polished marble towers of Clarke Innovations, carrying a man who had built tech empires but was now riding toward the past. He asked for Hillcrest Avenue, a neighborhood no navigation app would recommend after sunset. The cabbie looked surprised. You sure, sir? That part of town ain't what it used to be. Weston nodded. I used to live there. They drove past blocks of forgotten businesses, boarded up storefronts, and murals peeling off cinder block walls. But to Weston, every crack, every scar whispered a memory. A laundromat, the one where he and Marcus used to sleep by the dryers on winter nights. A corner store, the one where Marcus once traded his last meal for 2 hot dogs, grinning like it was gourmet. Eat slow, he'd said. This one's 5-star if you close your eyes. Weston almost cried that day. Not because he was hungry, but because someone had loved him enough to share what little they had. Now, decades later, he was the man with more wealth than he could ever spend. And Marcus? Gone. The cab pulled up to a sagging brick duplex. Weston stepped out slowly. The building looked tired, rust streaks under the windows, mailbox half broken, stairs worn down by time. He knocked on the green door with chipped paint. It creaked open, and there she was. Lila, hair in soft puffs, wearing a hoodie 2 sizes too big, a cautious smile on her face. "Hi," she said simply. Weston dropped to one knee, heart in his throat. "Hi, Lila. Is your grandma home?" "She's making tea." Then, as if remembering something she had been told to say, "She wasn't sure you'd really come." Weston managed a smile. "Neither was I." Inside, the apartment was small, humble, lived in, a worn armchair, a couch patched with careful stitches. On the wall, a photo, Marcus holding baby Lila in one arm and a cup of instant coffee in the other. Weston's breath caught again. The voice came from the kitchen, calm but cautious. "Lila, who is it?" A tall woman appeared, hair tied back in a bun of streaked silver, eyes proud and lined with storms weathered. She looked at Weston for a long moment. "You must be Weston." "Yes, ma'am, and you must be Mrs. Evers." "I'm Ruth," she said, "Marcus's mother." He extended his hand. She didn't shake it right away. She just studied him, the way a mother studies a man trying to be worthy of her son's memory. Then she nodded. "I'll pour the tea." They sat in a room filled with echoes, laughter long past, dreams folded into drawers, pain hidden beneath politeness. Ruth spoke first. "Marcus talked about you, called you a scrappy white boy with fists too big and shoes too thin." Weston chuckled softly. "Sounds accurate." "He said you'd gone on to build the world." He looked down. "Parts of it, maybe." "So what brings you here now? After all this time?" He didn't have a neat answer, just a lump in his throat and a letter in his pocket. "I didn't know he was gone," he said quietly. "Didn't even know he had a daughter. I found the letter last week, and I couldn't ignore it." Ruth nodded slowly. "Marcus didn't beg, you know. Never once. That letter wasn't a plea. It was a father's last hope." Weston swallowed hard. "I'd like to help." "With what? Guilt?" "No, ma'am. With purpose." Ruth finally smiled. "Then sit down." Lila made grilled cheese. That night, Weston Clarke, billionaire, builder, CEO, sat at a wobbly kitchen table with a little girl in bunny slippers and a grandmother who watched him like a hawk. And for the first time in years, he felt full, not from the food, but from something deeper, belonging. They say memory is a slippery thing, that it doesn't play back in full scenes, but in flashes, half sentences, smells, the texture of an old couch. For Weston Clarke, it was a napkin, a wrinkled diner napkin with a promise scrawled in blue ink. "I'll pay it forward, I promise. W.C." He hadn't thought about it in years, not until Lila pulled it from a shoebox beneath her father's bed. It was after dinner. Ruth was in the kitchen humming low as she rinsed dishes, and Weston had followed Lila down the narrow hallway to Marcus's old room. "This is Daddy's box," she said solemnly, kneeling beside the bed. "He said only special things go in here." She tugged it out, a battered shoebox wrapped in an old t-shirt. Inside were fragments of a life, a worn dog tag, bus tokens, a tiny notebook with sketches of mechanical parts, and folded among them, that napkin. Lila passed it to him like she was handing over a museum artifact. Weston read it once, then again. "I'll pay it forward, I promise." He stared at his own handwriting, crooked and urgent, probably written in that crummy diner on McDowell Avenue. The day Marcus paid for Weston's first job interview outfit, a clean shirt and borrowed tie. Marcus hadn't asked for anything in return, just that napkin. "You wrote that," Lila said, watching him closely. "I did," Weston whispered, voice thick. "I forgot, but I did." She nodded solemnly. "Daddy kept it in his wallet, said it reminded him of hope." Weston felt like the floor might cave under his feet. How many years had he spent chasing companies and contracts while that napkin lived folded beside Marcus's heart? And here it was, a relic, unredeemed. Lila reached back into the box and pulled out another item, a sealed envelope. On the front, in Marcus's familiar handwriting, it said, "For Weston Clarke, when the time is right." "Have you read it?" Weston asked gently. She shook her head. "Grandma said it was for you. Only you." Weston sat down slowly on the edge of the bed. The envelope felt heavier than it should, like it carried more than paper. He broke the seal with trembling fingers and unfolded the letter. "Dear Weston, if you're reading this, I didn't make it to hand this to you. That's okay. I've stopped waiting for perfect timing. Life never offers it. You were always the one with fire in your gut. I knew that about you from the start, even when you didn't believe it yourself. I was proud of you, brother. Even when you disappeared. I raised Lila alone. Her mama passed when she was just a baby. Jobs were hard to find, and my health got worse. You know how the system works. For men like me, it doesn't. But I'm not writing to complain. I'm writing because Lila deserves a world that listens, a world where a girl with her smile and her smarts isn't invisible. And I don't have much time left to make that world for her. So I'm asking you, not as a debt, but as a friend. See her, not as a favor, not from a distance, but see her, and don't let her disappear." Marcus Weston read it twice, then again. By the third time, his vision blurred. "Don't let her disappear." That line broke something inside him, because it wasn't a request, it was a lifeline. Marcus hadn't written asking for money or pity. He was handing Weston the most sacred thing he had left, his child. And Weston, he had nearly missed it. Had the letter not been found, had some intern not stumbled upon that dusty box, Lila might have remained just another name in a broken system. Forgotten, like so many. He folded the letter with reverence and slipped it into his coat pocket like armor. Lila was watching him quietly. "Are you sad?" she asked. Weston nodded. "Yeah," he whispered. "I am." She slid her small hand into his. "Daddy said being sad means your heart's still working." That night, Weston didn't return to his penthouse. Instead, he booked a small motel room near Hillcrest. Just a bed, a lamp, and silence. He sat at the desk, Marcus's letter in front of him, a blank sheet of paper beside it. He tried to write a plan, a mission, something immediate. But all that came were questions. How do you step into a life shaped by grief and poverty and do something right, without taking over, without turning it into charity? He stared at the blank page for an hour, and then he made a phone call. "Linda," he said when his longtime attorney answered, "I need your help, and I need it to be personal." The next morning, Ruth greeted him at the apartment door with a thick envelope in hand. "Medical bills," she said matter of fact. "Ones Marcus left behind. He didn't want her to see them." Weston flipped through the pages. X-rays, hospital stays, overdue notices, threats of collection. His stomach twisted. "Why didn't you apply for assistance?" "We did," Ruth said quietly. "Forms got lost. Deadlines passed. You know how it is. Marcus didn't want her to see him beg. I'll take care of these." "I didn't show you this for charity," she snapped. "I showed you so you'd understand who my son was. He didn't need saving. He needed a chance." Weston nodded slowly. "And Lila?" he asked. "She needs what every child does. Stability, safety, someone who doesn't disappear when it gets hard." That evening, Weston called Linda back. "I want to set up a trust," he said, "for Lila. Education, health care, whatever she needs." Linda paused. "Private or public?" "Public," Weston said, "and name it after her father, Marcus Evers Foundation." She sighed. "And you want legal guardianship too, don't you?" "I want options," Weston said, "and I want to do it right." That night he didn't sleep. He watched the city pulse through motel blinds. Lila's voice echoed in his mind. "Daddy said you once saved his life." Weston whispered to the dark, "Not yet. But I will." You'd think a billionaire in a courtroom would draw awe, maybe admiration, maybe even respect. But when Weston Clarke walked into Denver Family Court in a tailored gray suit, flanked not by security guards but holding the hand of a small black girl with beads in her hair and a backpack too big for her shoulders. The room didn't fall silent. It judged, silently, sharply. The judge, a thin man with wire-rimmed glasses and eyes like dusty marbles, didn't look up right away. He flipped through the folder before him, as if bored. "We're here to hear the petition of Mr. William Clarke for temporary legal guardianship of Lila Evers," he announced, voice dry. "Child currently under care of maternal grandmother, Ruth Evers, who has submitted signed consent." The judge looked up, finally locking eyes with Weston. "Mr. Clarke, in your own words, why should this court grant your request?" Weston stood. Every prepared line, every speech he'd mentally rehearsed, disappeared the moment he saw Lila's small fingers squeezing his. He took a breath. "I'm here," he said softly, "because I made a promise to a man who once shared his last meal with me." Some people in the courtroom blinked, shifted. Weston continued. "Marcus Evers saved my life, not with money, not with connections, but with quiet, unshakable kindness. And now his daughter needs someone to stand in that same place." He looked down at Lila, then back at the judge. "I'm not trying to replace anyone. I just want to continue what Marcus started, to make sure Lila is safe, loved, and seen." There was a pause. The judge turned to the state representative seated across the room, Ms. Gloria Bright, caseworker for Child Welfare Services. She looked up from her notes with tight lips and cool eyes. "Mr. Clarke's background is clean. Financials, flawless. But we have concerns," she said without blinking. "Concerns?" Weston asked gently. "You have no prior legal relationship to the child, no biological connection, and you've had no involvement in her life prior to 2 weeks ago." "I didn't know she existed until 2 weeks ago," he replied, firm but respectful. Gloria nodded, unbothered. "Exactly." What followed was a rapid-fire list of conditions: background checks, psychological evaluations, home inspections, quarterly reviews. To the court, Weston wasn't a hero. He was a wild card. "I understand all of that," Weston said, jaw clenched. "But the truth is, I'm not here out of guilt or publicity. I'm here because her father believed I could be someone for her, and I intend to earn that belief." Then the judge asked something unexpected. "Does the child wish to speak?" The room turned. Lila blinked, clutched Weston's hand tighter. Ruth gave her a small nod. The little girl stepped forward, stood on tiptoes to reach the microphone. "My daddy's not here anymore," she said, voice trembling but clear. "But he said Mr. Weston was important. He helps with my homework. He makes grilled cheese almost as good as Grandma." Laughter rippled softly. Lila took a breath. "I don't want a new daddy. I just don't want to lose the people who love me." And just like that, the courtroom changed. The judge leaned back in his chair, brows furrowed, not in doubt, but in quiet thought. After a long moment, he cleared his throat. "In light of the child's wishes, the guardian's consent, and the petitioner's readiness, I hereby grant temporary legal guardianship to Mr. William Clarke." The gavel fell. Weston squeezed Lila's hand. "Does that mean I get to stay?" she whispered. He knelt down and smiled. "It means we start writing our story." The media, of course, got wind of it. Tech billionaire granted guardianship over friend's orphaned daughter. Some praised it. Some called it performative. Some said Weston had manufactured a PR redemption arc. But Weston didn't care. He had too much work to do. That night back at the apartment, Ruth stopped him at the door with a flash drive taped inside a tattered library card. "He recorded something," she said quietly. "Said if you ever came back, you deserved to hear it in his own voice." Weston drove home, locked his office door, plugged in the drive. The screen lit up. Marcus, in a hospital bed, frail, eyes bright. "Hey, West," he said, chuckling softly. "If you're watching this, guess you finally found your way back." He coughed, but the smile never faded. "You don't owe me anything. That coat, that hot dog, that job lid I gave you. None of it was debt. It was love." He looked off camera for a moment, as if collecting breath. "But Lila, she's the best part of me. If you're back for her, I thank you. If you stay for her, I love you for it." The screen faded. Weston sat in the dark, whispering, "I'm staying." The next morning, Weston called a press conference, but not for himself, for the launch of the Marcus Evers Foundation, not with gala lights or champagne, just a quiet room, a banner, and a promise. "We're not just funding programs," he said. "We're fighting for visibility, for dignity, for children like Lila and fathers like Marcus who carry more weight than this world ever sees." He announced scholarships, rec center renovations, a tech lab named after Marcus at the local school, and one more thing. "We're building a wall." The room paused. A wall of voices, stories that were never told, pain that never got witnessed, truths that still deserve light. That afternoon, Weston and Lila returned to the rec center, an old brick building Marcus had volunteered at for years. In the back hallway, they began construction, a soft gray wall, framed in warm oak. At the top, engraved in steel, "Voices Unheard." The first story pinned to the wall, Marcus's, written in Weston's own hand. It told of sacrifice, of silence, of a man who took the fall for a crime he didn't commit so someone else could survive. Lila read it silently, lips moving with each word. When she finished, she looked up at Weston. "I always knew he was brave," she said, "but now everybody else knows too." Weston crouched beside her. "Truth takes time," he said, "but it's always worth the wait." It was a Tuesday when the invitation arrived. Heavy cardstock, navy trim, gold embossing, National Community Impact Awards, honoring transformational leaders. And there, beneath the title, William Clarke and the Marcus Evers Foundation. Weston stared at it for a long time. He'd been to events like this, many times. The tuxedos, the press lines, the polite applause. But this time, the honor didn't belong to him alone. He looked across the room where Lila sat cross-legged on the floor, coloring quietly. A little girl who had no idea she was the heartbeat of a movement. "Lila," he said, walking over, "there's something I want to ask you." She looked up, curious. "There's a big ceremony next Friday. They want me to speak, and I want you to come up with me." "Me?" She blinked. "Why?" Weston smiled. "Because you're the reason any of this exists." The week leading up to the event was filled with fittings, questions, and practice speeches. Evelyn came over with hot rollers and gospel hymns. Serena dropped off a dress Lila had secretly pointed to in a store window. And Weston? He did something unexpected. He wrote a speech, but not for the crowd, for Marcus. The night of the event arrived. The Kennedy Center glowed in soft light and ceremony. Reporters whispered, cameras flashed, and as Weston and Lila stepped onto the carpet, hand in hand, someone in the crowd murmured, "That's the little girl from the foundation, the one he fought for." Inside, amid chandeliers and violin solos, the evening unfolded. Local heroes, neighborhood organizers, educators. Then came their turn. Weston walked to the microphone. The room fell silent. "I used to think legacy was something you left behind," he began, voice low. "But now I know. It's something you build with your hands, your heart, and your time." He paused. "I was raised by numbers, metrics, deadlines. Success was measurable. But one day I made a phone call, and a little girl answered, and everything changed." He turned slightly, gesturing to Lila. "She reminded me of someone I once knew, a man who never asked for anything, who lived with grace and gave with quiet strength. A man who believed, when the world gave you a chance, you gave it to someone else." Weston's voice cracked, just slightly. "His name was Marcus Evers. This is his legacy. I'm just holding the light." Then he stepped back, and Lila took his place. She stood on a box behind the mic, wearing a sky blue dress, hair braided, ribbon tied with careful hands. "My name is Lila," she said softly. "I'm 9. I like grilled cheese, and I miss my dad." People leaned in. "But I'm not sad all the time anymore, because now I have people who see me, who stay." She glanced at Weston, then at the audience. "This building, the rec center, the wall, it's not just for us. It's for everybody who was told to sit down, to stay small. My daddy used to say that being brave doesn't mean you're not scared. It means you show up anyway." A hush fell. I want every kid who walks through those doors to know, you matter, you're not forgotten, and we saved you a seat. Applause thundered through the hall. Weston wiped his eyes. Lila stepped down, into his arms. The flight home was quiet. Lila slept on his shoulder, the award plaque nestled between them. Back in Denver, the rec center hosted a potluck. No speeches, no media, just chicken wings, mac and cheese, and paper cups with punch. Victor brought homemade bracelets for the kids. Serena gave out free library cards. Charles, now running weekly poetry nights, hugged everyone 3 times. And Evelyn. She pulled Weston aside and handed him a small velvet box. Inside was Marcus's old watch. He never wore it, she said. Said he was waiting for someone who could make time mean something. The next week, Weston received a letter. Not from a donor, not from a senator, but from a child. A boy named Malik who had joined the rec center's mentoring program after being suspended twice for fighting. It read, "Dear Mr. Clarke, I used to think people like me don't get second chances. Then I came to your place. You didn't ask me what I did wrong. You asked me what I dreamed of. I think that saved me. Sincerely, Malik." Weston folded the letter, pressed it to his chest, and whispered, "Thank you, Marcus." Then came the storm. A news headline. Billionaire's foundation under review for fraudulent donations? It wasn't true, but the internet didn't wait. Blogs erupted. Former critics resurfaced. And in boardrooms across Denver, whispers returned. Was it all just a PR stunt? Weston called a staff meeting that afternoon. The rec center was tense. Some parents pulled their kids early. A few partners froze funding. He stood before his team and said one thing. We didn't build this place for applause. We built it to withstand storms, so let them come. That evening, he and Lila went back to the rec center and scrubbed graffiti off the wall together. Someone had spray painted fake charity across the side. Lila looked up at him and said calmly, Daddy said when people get scared, they get loud. Then she dipped her sponge into the bucket and whispered, but we stay louder. The backlash faded. Quiet support returned. Anonymous donations. Volunteer applications tripled. And then came the biggest surprise of all. A letter from the city council. The Marcus Evers Pavilion has been nominated for permanent landmark status in Denver. Weston stood in silence reading it, then walked to the wall. Underneath Marcus's framed photo, he taped a sticky note in Lila's handwriting. It read, "We don't need perfect. We just need real." The video of Lila's speech went viral. 3 million views, 1 million shares. But Weston didn't care about the views. He cared about what came in the comments. One in particular stood out. I was going to give up this week. On my son. On myself. Then I watched this. Now I'm not. Thank you. One night after story time and teeth brushing, Lila looked up from her bed and asked, Do you think Daddy sees all of this? Weston tucked the covers under her chin. I think he's smiling every time we keep going. She nodded. Then let's never stop. That weekend, a boy showed up at the pavilion's door. Shoes torn, shirt too small, no name on the sign-in sheet. Victor stepped forward. You need something, son? The boy looked up. I just want to belong somewhere. Weston saw the hesitation in his eyes, and he stepped forward. You already do, he said. We've been waiting for you. That's the thing about legacy. It doesn't whisper through wealth. It roars through lives touched. A letter never mailed, a hot dog shared, a napkin with a promise, and a child who reminds the world that love, real love, doesn't show up once. It stays. So if someone asks you what this story is really about, tell them it's about one man's kindness echoing across time. Tell them it's about a little black girl who carried her father's strength into a courtroom. And tell them it's about a world that tries to forget people like Marcus until someone brave enough refuses to let it.